Hello everyone, Blind Dweller here. Today we return ourselves to the story and artwork of Frida Kahlo in part 2 of the To Feel the Pain of Frida Kahlo series. In the last episode, we looked at Kahlo's early life, her educational years, and the beginning of her art career, which mostly ignited after a terrible bus accident when she was 18, as well as a relationship and marriage to the love of her life, Diego Rivera. In this episode, we'll be picking up Kahlo's story around the time she and Rivera returned to Mexico after briefly living in the United States during the early 1930s. This is when, at least in my opinion, some of Kahlo's finest masterpieces truly begin to emerge. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Welcome to another video everybody, and welcome to part 2 of the story and artwork of Frida Kahlo. By 1933, Kahlo was living in New York City with her husband Diego Rivera. Rivera was commissioned by Nelson Rockefeller to create a mural named Man at the Crossroads at the Rockefeller Center. Their time in New York would be cut very short, however, as Rivera tried to include the Russian communist revolutionary Vladimir Lenin in the painting. When the Rockefeller Center discovered this, they immediately stopped his work, and that part was painted over. The couple then had to move back to Mexico after this incident, and so they returned to live in a new house within the rural hamlet of San Angel. This return to Mexico would be met with much bitterness from Rivera, however. He was enjoying the fame and popularity he was receiving in the States, and never wished to go back. This would create a huge rift of conflict between him and Kahlo, a conflict that would inspire one of Frida's most unique artworks, titled My Dress Hangs There, completed the year the couple moved back to Mexico. Although on this rare occasion, Kahlo would not feature herself in this painting, there are so many things to uncover in this piece that truly reflect her mind during this period. Quite simply, Kahlo is depicting the superficiality of American capitalism and consumerism. This painting is scattered with the icons of a modern industrial society of the United States, whilst also implying that society is decaying and that the fundamental human values are left in ruins. Although again there is no sign of Kahlo in this painting, right in the centre, the conspicuous side of one of her many traditional dresses can be seen hanging there, from a line attached to a golden trophy on the right and a toilet on the left. Most experts deduce that this is analogous to Kahlo's feeling of losing her sense of self within the more frantic and chaotic world of the big American cities. As if to say, I may be in America, but only my dress hangs there. My heart still remains in Mexico. Or maybe that she felt that the only thing that still belonged to her during her time in America was her Mexican heritage. The two supporting objects of a toilet and trophy could be seen as Frida's attempt to subtly mock the American obsession with efficient plumbing and the preoccupation with sports by setting them upon pedestals. There are many other clues similar to this as well, such as her targeting business, religion, and the eclecticism of American culture. A garbage can is overflowing with waste, whilst a crowd of thousands of people at the bottom seem to be overflowing themselves, clambering over each other to reach the promises of fame and fortune that America continuously preaches to the masses. Even the scale of the objects compared to the crowd and positioning them right at the bottom, underneath all of this iconography, could symbolize how Kahlo viewed the treatment of the common people compared to the rich business owners and celebrities. In the stained glass window of the church is a red dollar sign wrapped around the cross. Next to the church is a billboard and what looks like Mae West displayed on it, hinting that the film star represents false values, vanity, luxury, and the worship of manufactured beauty. The advert is peeling from the edges, and the building below is burning, perhaps a hint from Kahlo that nothing is deemed permanent, even within capitalism. Whether Kahlo truly felt this disenchanted by America or not, it was still plainly clear that Mexico would always be her home, though it would unfortunately be of no help to improving the relationship with her husband. In the following year of 1934, Frida would experience yet another miscarriage, which may have inspired the painting titled Me and My Doll, completed not long after. By the time this was painted, Frida had lost many unborn children by this stage. She had also been collecting dolls and grown a collection of pets, which she apparently devoted her maternal love to. These pets that included tropical birds and even monkeys would, as we'll soon see, make more prominent appearances in her paintings in the years to come. In this painting though, it depicts Frida sitting on a bed with supposedly one of her dolls, but she also seems distant and disconnected with the substitute of her baby. She stares ahead directly at the viewer, almost as if she is completely unaware that the doll is even there. If you look closely, you can also see that she's holding a cigarette. Smoking around a child, even back then, was considered to be very irresponsible, amplifying her detachment to the doll next to her. If this was a sign of her giving up hope to bear a child, there was yet even worse heartache to come. Rivera continued to have many affairs, and Kahlo too would regularly cheat on her husband in return in bouts of revenge. Diego would practically turn a blind eye to Frida's female lovers, but would become madly jealous whenever he would discover Frida's affairs with other men. Perhaps it would be this jealousy that led to a breaking point in 1935, when Rivera had an affair with Kahlo's younger sister, Cristina. Distraught, enraged, and heartbroken, as far as Kahlo was concerned, this was the final straw. The couple would live in separate homes from here onwards, and she would aid her pain through yet more secret lovers, and of course, through her art. In this portrait, titled Self-Portrait with Curly Hair, completed the same year of Rivera's affair with Cristina, it shows the results of Kahlo cutting off her hair in retaliation to the event, as Diego was reportedly very fond of her long flowing hair. But this would only be one revealing painting out of many others that reflect this time in Kahlo's life. In fact, around this time of their first divorce and the subsequent reunion that followed, some of Kahlo's most recognizable paintings would emerge, not to mention that a lot of her work from this period are some of her most powerful. Such as this portrait titled Memory, the Heart, completed in 1937. Some experts believe this to be a prime example of Kahlo expressing her misery and resentment over the affair that happened 2 years prior. In this painting, her face is nearly expressionless, yet tears can still be seen running down her cheeks. She still has short, cropped hair, and is wearing the European-style clothes, which style became her favourite when she separated from Rivera. And as always, she uses the physical wounds to imply her psychological pain. In the background is a school uniform, her Tuana costume, and each set of clothes have one arm, with Kahlo standing there without arms and seeming helpless. She stands there with one foot on the ground and the other in the sea. This foot also wears an apparatus and suggests the foot surgery she was undergoing at the time. The biggest giveaway that suggests she was utterly heartbroken is her huge heart that lies on the ground at her feet and was pumping rivers of blood in the background landscape. Her body is pierced by a steel rod with seesawing cupids on either end, creating an accurate visualization of the sensation of the love-induced pain that she was experiencing. There are also some paintings that reveal much to us about her secret relationships, especially the ones that followed the affair between Cristina and Diego. This painting, titled Self-Portrait dedicated to Leon Trotsky, or sometimes known as Between the Curtains, was also completed in 1937. On the surface, nothing heavily symbolic can be seen, but what's most significant is who exactly the person this painting is dedicated to. Following the Cristina and Diego affair, and in the build-up to the divorce that would soon follow, Kahlo was more rebellious and resentful towards Rivera than ever, and was eager to get her own back. This is where Leon Trotsky comes in. Trotsky was a Russian political rival of Joseph Stalin at the time and was deeply committed to the theories of Marxism, a way of thinking that both Rivera and Kahlo admired. In 1936, Stalin finally chased the rival Trotsky into exile. Unable to find asylum in other countries, Frida's husband, Diego Rivera, persuaded the Mexican president Lázaro Cárdenas to grant Trotsky asylum in their country. In January of 1937, Leon Trotsky and his wife, Natalia Sedova, arrived in Mexico and were greeted personally by Kahlo. She gave them the use of her blue house in Coyoacán, where they lived for the next 2 years. During that time, the Riveras and the Trotskys spent a lot of time together, and in the early summer of 1937, Kahlo and Trotsky began a secret love affair. Trotsky was notoriously attracted to younger women, and Kahlo would be keen to use her seductive talents to her advantage. But before long, Kahlo grew tired of Trotsky, whom she called the old man, and the affair soon ended. After their relationship ended in July, Frida painted this self-portrait and gave it to Trotsky, who hung it on the wall in his study. In April of 1939, the Trotskys moved from the blue house, and Trotsky, at the request of his wife, left the painting behind. Now, we may have already seen glimpses of this within Frida Kahlo's work, but by 1938, many of her paintings began to take on a darker atmosphere and resonate far more eerie themes than before. Even her use of colours was seemingly becoming more muted and cold. A good first stop to show what I mean would be her painting titled Four Inhabitants of Mexico, completed that same year. Here Kahlo presents us with some interesting personalities, such as a Judas, a pre-Columbian symbol of a Nayarit, a skeleton of the sort that children like to dangle on a Day of the Dead, and in the distance, a straw man riding a donkey. Kahlo depicts herself as a toddler, sitting on the ground sucking her fingers and holding onto a skirt. It's theorized that Kahlo is expressing a feeling of consternation because her mother has left her to sit unattended. She looks on in amazement at the pregnant mud or clay figure and the skeleton in front of her. The mud figure, with her broken and repaired head, addresses Mexico's past. Since the fronts of her feet are missing, we know she also stays for Frida, who had different foot operations in the 1930s, one of which, in 1934, included the evacuation of parts of the toes to her right foot. Unquestionably, none of the four inhabitants of Mexico take any notice of Frida. She's connected with them, but just by the touch of their shadows. It really does give off the impression that we're witnessing a jarring dream of Frida's coming to life. In the same year, she would complete another strange and unsettling painting with similar Day of the Dead themes, titled Girl with Death Mask, or sometimes referred to as She Plays Alone. The girl presented in the painting is again believed to be Kahlo herself, wearing a skull mask. This kind of mask is a tradition at the annual Mexican festival Day of the Dead, where death is something that's celebrated, or at least more openly accepted, instead of something that is heavily mourned and feared. The little girl is holding a yellow blossom in her hands, which closely resembles the same marigold flower commonly used by Mexicans to put on the graves during the festival. She stands in an empty, vast expanse under a gloomy sky, again all by herself, amplifying that familiar feeling of loneliness that often appears in her work. By her feet, there appears to be a carved wooden tiger mask, which is said to be used as a talisman to protect the child against evil. It would seem Kahlo's state of mind during this time was heavily influenced by death and sadness. Perhaps the fact that she and Diego were on the verge of a divorce would have certainly contributed to her deep depression that shone through a great deal of her work within this period. But even her occasional still life paintings during this time would reflect such feelings as well. such as a painting titled Pitahayas, which again is considered to be a subtle meditation on death. Because of the fruit's watery freshness that can provide sustenance in the most barren terrains of the deserts in which they grow in, the pitahaya is known as the fruit of a shipwrecked man. But even this most life-giving of fruits is subject to decay, as represented in this painting. By the time 1939 came around, Kahlo would travel to Paris, where she exhibited her works in the Renaud and Cole Gallery in March and met many prominent painters, including the likes of Marc Chagall, Piet Mondrian, and Pablo Picasso. The exhibition was at the invitation of another established artist named André Breton. Breton was a leading figure within the Surrealist movement, who Kahlo had met the year before, and who is documented to be one of the first artists to label Kahlo as being a Surrealist artist herself. Quote, "Really, I do not know whether my paintings are Surrealist or not, but I do know that they are the frankest expression of myself. Since my subjects have always been my sensations, my states of mind, and the profound reactions that life has been producing in me, I have frequently objectified all this in figures of myself, which were the most sincere and real thing that I could do in order to express what I felt inside and outside of myself." End quote. Following her return to Mexico, the inevitable finally happened. Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera officially divorced at the end of the year, and this separation would inspire one of Kahlo's largest and most well-known paintings of her entire repertoire. The painting, titled The Two Fridas, would be completed shortly after her divorce to Diego Rivera. This painting has been discussed frequently by critics, historians, and art fans from all over the world for decades, making it undeniably one of her most heavily researched paintings. This portrait shows two personalities of Frida Kahlo. One is the more traditional Frida in her Tuana costume, a Frida rejected by Rivera with a broken heart, sitting next to a more independent, modern-dressed Frida with her heart seemingly well intact. In Kahlo's diary, she alluded to the idea that this painting originated from her memory of an imaginary childhood friend. Later, she admitted it expressed her desperation and loneliness that came with the separation from Rivera. In this painting, the two Fridas are holding hands. They both have visible hearts, and the heart of the traditional Frida is cut and torn open. The main artery, which comes from the torn heart down to the right hand of the traditional Frida, is cut off by surgical scissors held in her lap. Some theorize that it may represent the beauty and fairness implied by the white dress being lost by the smearing of blood on it. If we look at the left hand of the other Frida, you may notice her holding a small oval-shaped portrait or locket of some sorts, again attached to a vein that connects to her heart. Although left purposely obscured, many keen-eyed experts believe this to be an image of Diego Rivera when he was a child. Although generally people agree that due to the symbolism used and the time frame this was created in, as well as what Kahlo wrote in her diary, that this painting was made to reflect Kahlo's sorrow during the divorce, many different meanings can emerge from this piece due to its subtlety. Some say it may also symbolize Kahlo's different identities, namely her European and Mexican identities, evident in the dresses she wears. Furthermore, some have also said that it again refers to her frequent visits to the operation table due to her injuries and constant physical health issues, or possibly a combination of all of these themes merged into one. The heartache that Frida felt following the divorce between her and Diego would be in the end very short-lived. No more than a year later, in September 1940, Kahlo travelled to San Francisco for treatment from a doctor, and it would be here only a few months later that she would reconcile with Diego and they remarried in December. Although a second chance lay before them, Their second marriage would be no different from the last. They would continue to live separate lives in separate houses, along with acting out their relentless habits of infidelity. Within her art though, her skills and versatility as an artist was well and truly improving. In the year of 1940, she would complete 2 more of her most recognizable portraits, such as a painting titled Self-Portrait, dedicated to Dr. Alessa. Dr. Leo Alessa was one of Frida's most trusted physicians and medical advisors, who would tend to and look after Kahlo right up to her final days. As the title suggests, Kahlo dedicated this painting to him, possibly as a thanks to him when he treated the pain that was in her right foot during her stay in San Francisco. There are some heavily Catholic Christian themes that are noticeable in this painting, most significantly the necklace of thorns, which appears to be drawing blood from her neck. It's an interesting piece to research in depth, as many sources seem to suggest that this indicates Kahlo's fascination in the graphic nature of a retelling of Jesus Christ's crucifixion that existed around her growing up in Mexico. In many Christian households and churches, it was not uncommon in Mexico to see an emphasis on the crucifixion, as well as the bloody details of it. She would even have many of these types of Christian art in her own home, and it would seem many of her self-portraits follow a similar train of thought. Another well-known portrait of hers during this time, titled Self-Portrait with Necklace of Thorns and a Hummingbird, again as the title suggests, returns us to this very same theme from the last one. This small portrait displays many aspects which are symbolic to Frida Kahlo. She faces the viewer with a background of large green leaves and a yellow leaf right behind her. The thorns are around her neck like a necklace, which is held by a black monkey, possibly a depiction of her pet spider monkey named Fulang Chang. Her neck is again bleeding from the thorns piercing her skin. On the right side behind her shoulder is a black cat, which again may have been one of her many pets at the time. Finally, a dead hummingbird appears to be dangling from a thorn necklace. Her expression is calm and solemn, almost as if she is patiently enduring the pain whilst looking directly into the viewer's eyes. But what of the symbolism that's used in this piece? Often a bird symbolizes freedom and life within art, but the hummingbird is especially telling, which is usually colorful and always hovering above flowers. But in this painting, the hummingbird is dark and lifeless. This alone might be a symbol of Frida herself, someone who used to feel free and beautiful, only to become a husk of her former self, since she endured yet more physical pain and disfigurement since her fateful bus accident when she was 18. In the following year of 1941, by this time her portraits were beginning to garner a lot of attention and buzz within the local art scene. In fact, during this same year, she received a commission from the Mexican government for 5 portraits of important Mexican women. However, she would be unable to complete the project, when her work was once again interrupted by tragedy. On April 14th, 1941, Kahlo's father, Guillermo Kahlo, died of a heart attack. This loss, mixed with the continuing chronic pain that she was suffering, would be almost unbearable for her. It's important to remember that her father was primarily responsible for her avid interest in art, and was always the parent who was closest to her, helping her frequently throughout her younger days to overcome her health issues. She often saw him as being a brave and intelligent man. Now that he had passed, the only prominent male role model left in her life was her estranged husband. It would be at least 10 years before Frida decided she would paint her father after his death, in the painting titled Portrait of My Father, completed in 1951. At the bottom of the painting, in the style of an ex voto, the artist wrote the following message, quote, "I painted my father, Wilhelm Kahlo, of German-Hungarian origin, a photographic artist by profession, generous, intelligent, and refined in character, and brave because he suffered from epilepsy for 60 years, but never stopped working, and he fought against Hitler. Adoringly, his daughter, Frida Kahlo." End quote. As devastating as the loss of her father may have been, in spite of her continuing toxic marriage, her relentless physical pain, as well as her increasing alcohol habits that she used to combat it, the beginning of the 40s, as far as her art would be concerned, would prove to be a significant time in her life. More questions were abound at this point as to who exactly this mysterious Mexican artist was that was beginning to fill more and more exhibitions, both nationally and abroad. The art that would follow would be just as elusive and would continue to open up yet more windows into the mind of this extraordinary individual. That's it for part 2 then, everyone. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you've been enjoying this series so far. I reckon at the rate things are going, we've only got one more video left to do until this series is complete. So please keep your eyes and ears peeled for part 3, which I promise I'll try my utmost to get finished and released as soon as possible. Before I end the video, it's that time again for Artist Corner. Here I get to share some artwork sent in by one of my viewers, and today's featured artist is, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Vavno Yaze. Currently living in Buffalo, New York, but originally from a Native American reservation as part of the Diné tribe in Cove, Arizona. Vavno has been drawing and creating oil paintings for around 23 years. He tells me after watching his father paint a wolf one day, which he described as being extremely magical and beautiful, he became motivated to start painting himself. He was also heavily drawn to comic book art as well when he was growing up. The main inspiration behind the imagery in his art, he tells me, is his desire to blend emotions with dreams. Sadly, he normally keeps his art private and doesn't have any social media or online hub for his artwork at the moment. But I really wanted to share his art with you guys today, with his permission of course, as I find his work so beautifully detailed and imaginative. If you too would like me to potentially share some of your artwork in one of my videos, I'd love to hear from you. Please send me an email to blinddweller@gmail.com or feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. Don't forget to join my Discord server as well. In the Blind Dwellers Art Club, you can meet other artists, get some new ideas, or share your own. Finally, as always, a massive thank you to all my patrons and channel members, and a special shout out to all of my top tier donators. Tyler Butler, Harley Raven, Eric Lamarca, Tyler Rogers, Dave MC, Booty Magic, Molotale, Venuon Gorham 24, Equatomok, Ken B, Lee Flowers, Calvin Kai, Akaiza, Carol H, Fernando Achicaro, Large Fatty or Big Chad, Charlie Sancheesy, and Port Perea. See you soon for part 3 then, everyone. Keep being creative, and bye for now.